We should be live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Smite Club Videocast number 2. I just want to start off by saying we're trying some new technological things this evening, so if it's a little bit rough, I apologize. I'm still kind of new and figuring things out, so we're always improving on that front. Never quite perfect. But I'd like to welcome fellow teammates Tim and Mark with us tonight. Unfortunately, Don Hooson, who was scheduled to be on the videocast, doesn't seem to be able to make it after all. So it's just going to be the two of us, and we're going to cover just some tournaments that our team members went to this weekend. And so I'm going to start with Tim, and just have Tim share with all of you kind of what he did, where he went, and how he performed over the weekend. Tim, if you want to take it away and start explaining to everybody what was the format of the tournament you played in this last weekend.
Yeah, sure. So it was a doubles tournament that was 2,000 points. So each person had 1,000 points in each part of their list, and it was I think like 8 teams or something like that. So it was pretty standard almost, but with 16 people instead of 8. So that was kind of nice. And that was at the new store over in Tempe, the Gamers Guild, actually. So that was kind of nice to be able to go to a new shop, be able to see what they've got, and see their terrain, their tables, etc. But besides that, what I brought and what my teammate Robert brought, his list is way simpler to go through than mine because he brought Custodes, I brought Admech. Mine was a Marshall, Manipulus, 20 Rangers, 25 Vanguard, 3 Laz Chicken Walkers, 5 Taraxi, 9 Raiders. And his was 2 Telemons with the Elastius and Fists, I believe, and then 5 Sagittarium Guard and Traden.
What were the rules for building each half of your list? So it sounds like it was 1,000 points each. Did you have like anything you could do with that 1,000 points, or how did it have to come together?
It was standard like match play rules. It was, build your army in any way that you can. 6 command points, so spend them as freely as you like. Command points were not shared. So it was, you kept track of your own command points, and you could not use command points for your friendly. But other than that, it was pretty standard fare. I mean, I played my game, Robert played his game. The two of us were just basically like, I'll focus this down, you focus this down. Same thing with opponents. It worked pretty well, actually. I liked it a lot, like a lot more than I thought.
How much time and effort did you guys put into like synergizing a list beforehand? Did you basically just kind of show up, or was there a method to the madness?
I'll be honest, I threw together a 1K list that I thought would be pretty fun to play. For me, not for my opponents. And Robert just wanted to test out Telemons more than anything else. He didn't care about anything else. He just was like, I want to test out Telemons, see how well they do. And we just kind of showed up, and we're just like, we're just gonna roll with this. Like, I think we shared each other's lists like 2 nights before, and we're just like, yeah, screw it. We'll just run this. This will be fun for us.
Did the tournament adjust the mission in any way, or are you just playing straight GT out of the book?
Straight GT out of the mission. Straight GT out of the book missions with secondaries, and then of course you could take 1 book secondary at least, or like 1 codex secondary at least. I don't know if there was any stipulations on being able to take 2 for each different codex. Simply because at the time, Robert's Custodes do not have their own secondaries, and I only used the Adeptus Mechanicus secondaries in 1 of the games.
How do they for the secondaries? How do they handle something like deploy scramblers, which doesn't exist anymore, right? It's something data, right?
So we were using the 2021 packet. Yeah, so it was straight up, if I do scramblers in this corner, Robert could scrambler in this corner, and then I could scramble in the other 2 corners still and get points.
Cool. Awesome.
Or engage, we all, it's literally just, you're playing 2,000 points, but with 2 people. That's the main thing right there.
Gotcha.
So, go ahead.
No, I
was just gonna say, it wasn't that different, other than, just, oh yeah, I have less command points and another person to deal with things. That's all it is.
Gotcha. So give us a quick rundown. 3 rounds, right? So take us through each of your rounds. Maybe we don't need like a turn-by-turn analysis, but just a couple of highlights and maybe what you think you did right and wrong in each of the rounds.
Yep. So first round was against Necron Marines. There wasn't a whole lot going on in that game. It was a newer pair of players, but I'd say one of my highlights was taking a 20-man brick Vanguard and deleting a 20-man warrior brick before they could even do anything.
So that's something that people are talking about, right? So with AdMech, there aren't a lot of things that can kill 20 warriors, in like very quickly.
Yep.
What's the downside to a unit like that can output that much damage?
So, I mean, think of it like this. You're firing strength 3, no AP guns that you can buff up to -1 AP with 24 inches, and only one of them can actually benefit from the whole auto wounding on 4 stratagem. So the entire time you're just basically like, all right, I need to be able to maximize this damage as possible. And if I can't maximize it, then you might not even worry about spending the CP for it. I'm trying to think what else, because I mean, there's not a whole lot there with that. That's the thing, is that unit is just specifically 170 points with a data tether and omni specs for 20 bodies that fire 60 shots at 18 inches. No AP, but it's weighted dice at that point.
Sure, sure. So game one, newer players,
Mm-hmm.
probably not the most practiced. Was it their first tournament at like ever, or would they?
It was actually.
Okay.
It was. So it was one of those things that a lot of the game, me and Robert were giving them pointers, like things to do against us in particular, and what to do in the future as well. Because that why not? Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
But it was still one of those things that there wasn't a whole lot going on that they could have done. Just from certain army compositions. Although the one thing that was frightful for mostly me was the Nightbringer, because me and Robert mostly just had a shooting force. He did have some melee with us with the Telemons, but we did not want those to get into melee with the Nightbringer.
Sure. Do you have, so Custodes don't really have access to Smite in faction. AdMech, if I remember correctly, don't have access to Smite in faction. So what do you do against models like the Nightbringer or Gazgul, these models where you have to do damage across multiple phases? What's the game plan when you come up against something like that and you can only really hurt it in one phase?
I think at that point the game plan is just continually keep kiting them around. Use the long range to advantage and be able to kind of move around the board so that you're moving into other units, but making sure that they are still keeping their distance with things. It's a little tricky to be able to deal with that sort of stuff. But there are multiple things where it's like, well, I can at least consistently do 3 damage every single turn to this guy. So I can whittle him down over 4 turns or 3 turns if I have Rust Stalkers or whatever else it is. Because I know in like future iterations of the list, I will be running Rust Stalkers because I think they're in a really good spot. But yeah, if you don't have that sort of capability, it's difficult.
Interesting. So that's game 1.
Yep.
Win, obviously.
Yep. Yep.
What happens in game 2?
Game 2, we go up against Aaron and Dan. And Aaron and Dan, originally we were talking about bringing like a really silly list with Wraith units and Gene Steel Occult, but they brought Deathwing and Craft Worlds. We did get the turn 1. We actually blew up Dan's Wave Serpent on turn 1, funnily enough, with all his Dark Reapers inside, and it exploded and killed his Warlock, which then Phoenix gemmed back to life. And we're just sitting there like, oh, that sucks. But that one, funnily enough, was not super eventful because we were playing it very passively, even though we should have been playing it more aggressively. We chose the wrong secondaries for it. We did go with Retrieve Octarius data. I'm just going to call it a Rod from now on, if it's way easier. But then we went with Abhor the Witch and Assassinate, and we were not aggressive in the slightest. And it was on battle line, so 4 objective. I could keep killing Terminators day in and day out, and with Apothecaries being able to bring them back for free, it doesn't matter, because I could also just sit there and wish that I could fire at anything Deathwing related character-wise, but because of command squads, I simply can't. I say that with Raiders because they ignore Lookout Sir. So I know it sounds like that game should have been more interesting, but it really wasn't because we were playing it so passively. And I did also massively messed up by forgetting to drop my Traxi by turn 3. So that cost us so many extra secondary points. But at the same time, I knew as soon as they dropped in that the Dark Reapers would just delete them. Yeah,
unfortunately, so for those listening, Dan and Aaron have been on the channel multiple times for stream games. They're 2 of the better players in our club. Dan's definitely in the top 2, if not the best player on our club. So this is a tough game, and their army lists, right? Aaron has basically just 17 Dark Angels Terminators, which are like don't die, backed up by janky Eldar Dark Reaper shooting, and I'm assuming Dan packed in as many smites as he could. So
yeah, I mean, the reason we took Abhor of the Witch is because they had like 4 or 5 psychers.
yeah, yeah.
And we're like, we can totally, provided we get some kills on characters, that's some assassinates, that's some abhors. But we chose poorly, and even afterwards, Dan's like, I don't know what you choose in this situation if you're not going to go aggressive.
Going aggressive's hard though, right? Because
Yeah.
because the Terminators are really resilient, right? Well, we'll get to you, Mark.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's fine.
Terminators are normally pretty resilient, and you beat Dark Angels, right, by avoiding them, being passive, playing the mission, and with this particular team tournament, if you do that, Dan's Dark Reapers and Psychic powers just chew your army up over 5 turns. So it's a really good combination of units that they brought to the team.
Exactly, and especially with Dan being able to constantly just keep firing and fading with the Dark Reapers, and it's just like, all right, so they're in the building, now they're behind the building, they're in the building, they're behind the building, and it's just, what do you do with that when you don't have no LOS shooting and you don't have any way of just getting in there right away? It's difficult, and especially on long deployment with battle lines, it's very difficult. Like I said though, our main issue was we misplayed. We didn't go in as aggressively as we should have. Because, I mean, worst case, if we really needed to, we could have maybe had like one of the Telemons go into like a brick of the Deathwing and maybe killed 1 or 2. And I don't think that they would have done nearly enough damage back to the Telemon. At least in that initial charge, they probably would have killed it afterwards. But I think there's still a bunch of different things we could have done. We could have also taken the secondary for the mission itself and forced them to come out to us.
So game 2, no shame in that loss.
Yep.
Aaron and Dan extremely good, brought really good armies. Do you know what the finals ended up being?
Let me take a look real quick. Actually, no, I don't off the top of my head, because I just remembered that even though we had the event on BCP originally, because of how it was structured, it's a little weird and wonky, and we couldn't actually get it on there. I want to say the final score was something like 76 to like 29 or something like that afterwards. So it was very, very in their favor, because, stubborn defiance. Why not get 15 points for free?
Marine secondary.
Yeah. They're even without Oath the Moments, it's like, yeah, no, I have stubborn defiance. I get 15 points just for existing.
Especially with the Deathwing.
Yeah. Silly.
That's game 2.
Yep.
Final game of the day.
All right. So final game of the day was Chaos Demons versus Chaos Demons and Custodes, which a bit of a weird combination. Funnily enough, they actually were the first round opponents for Aaron and Dan. So they tried to take a few things that Aaron and Dan were saying into account against us, but unfortunately it ended up playing a little bit against them. For example, turn 1, Bloodthirster came out and tried charging into my Cerberus Raiders, and I just spent the 2 CP just to yoink them out just outside 12 inches, and that just left the Bloodthirster just sitting there out in the open. And what can I say? 20 Rangers can kill a Bloodthirster, because even if you have a 4-up save, I'm minus 1 AP. You're going from a 3 up to a 4 up. I don't care, and that's 40 shots, and whatever else I needed to fire at. And then afterwards, 30-man Bloodletter pack. He moves him into a building, and I move my Vanguard into a building, have line of sight with everything. All right, auto winning on 4s, 40 wounds. Like, yeah, 40 wounds, and he failed 31. So it was just enough to take the squad, just pick it up. Then I could not, for whatever, because the Custody player brought some regular bikes. He brought Shield Captain on a bike. He brought the Callidius. I cannot pop the Callidius for whatever reason. He kept rolling 5s, and I'm like, all right, cool, sure, whatever. I'll take it on the chin. Keep trying, and eventually I was down to one chicken walker, and this is the one mission where I did take one of my secondaries, and it's the one where, provided I have an Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle unit on the field, if I kill more infantry than they kill vehicle units of mine, I get 3 points per turn. So I was specifically like, Robert, don't kill this infantry unit. Let me kill it. Don't kill this infantry unit. Let me kill it. And the entire time I'm just like trying to keep my chicken walkers alive. And like I said, I ended the game with one alive, and only because that Callidius just would not go down for the first 3 turns of the game. But it was your standard fare where we went engage in all fronts, retrieve Octarius data, and all right, here's my Traxi. They're gonna go ahead and action. Do you have any way to shoot at them? Cool, you don't? Cool. I'm gonna spend 1 CP or no CP at the end of my turn and just bring them back into reserves. Because, retrieve Octarius data and engage in all fronts, they finish at the end of turn, and I can bring them back at the end of my turn. Yeah.
So the final game ends up going well for you.
Mm-hmm.
What could you have done even better than what you did? Right? No game's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, even in a win. So what would you have tweaked to like maximize the score, or make it even better for next time?
So I know the first 2 turns we were struggling with the brick of Custodes bikes because it was a 5-man unit, and I was letting Robert kind of deal with the majority of that. What we should have done is maybe swapped it around a little bit, where I was shooting into the bikes with a lot of my stuff. Granted, the Bloodthirster blob still needed to die from Vanguard like that. But if I had shot like the Rangers, for example, into the bike squad, that might have been a little bit better. Because that would be a lot of 1 damage rolling that he would have to do on a 4-up. Because I would give them the AP -2 instead of having them be AP 1, and then have Robert fire and deal with the Bloodthirster instead. Because I think that would have probably almost all but guaranteed that those bikes would be dead. And then we wouldn't have to worry about them scurrying around for the first 2 turns where, oh, hey, this one's moving this way, and then they're moving over this way, and then we have a 3-up invuln shield captain in our base and stuff like that. So I think that's the main thing I would take away from the 3rd game, at least.
So, end up going 2-1 for the day.
Yep.
What was your final placing?
2nd, actually.
That's great. That's great. So with 8 teams, there would have been one team that won all 3 games.
Yes.
Right. That was not Aaron and Dan, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they were telling me about that afterwards, and I was like, "What are you guys doing?" Like,
well, so you picked up enough points in the final round to jump them, right?
Yes.
To jump them in the tiebreaker for 2nd place. Real quick, a couple of thoughts finishing this up. What are your thoughts on the team tournament format versus like a more traditional single person tournament?
So I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. Originally, when I even found out about it, I thought it was going to be, everybody brings 2,000 points and the games are 4,000 points and it just takes forever. But I'm glad that wasn't the case. I think at 1,000 points between 2 people, it's spread out to be like really solid to where there's not too many issues there. I actually genuinely really enjoyed it, and if we did it again, I would probably do it in a heartbeat. Like, it's fun to be able to just bring 1,000 points and be able to strategize with somebody else to figure out what do we do in this situation, what do we bring in this like reason and stuff like that. I liked it a lot more than I thought.
So that segues into my next and final question for you. Obviously, people aren't going to fly in for a single day like RTT. But if people are within driving distance, so if you live anywhere kind of in the Phoenix metro area or, Arizona, would you recommend, is this something worth driving 2 or 3 hours to participate in next time?
That's a good question, actually. Um, I mean, like I said, I massively enjoyed it. I know a lot of other people enjoyed it a lot as well. Um, I'm not sure about driving 2 or 3 hours for it, especially depending on whether or not it actually gives IPC points. Because I know some people will chase specifically for points and not. This was one of those. I just wanted to go to a tournament. I didn't care about the APC points for this. In 2 weeks there's another, or yeah, in 2 Saturdays there's another tournament out that way. So it's just like, yeah, I'll go to that one and get my points that way. Um, and I think the intention originally was for us to be able to get points with this, but I'm still not sure about whether or not that's good there. But again, if you want like a fun tournament to do, yeah, absolutely, hit up a bud and be like, hey, build a 1,000 point list. Let's go run a tournament.
Awesome. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say about your experience?
I can't think of too much, I'll be honest. Other than I really enjoy the new AdMech book. I think it's fantastic. It's everything that me as an AdMech nut could have dreamed for.
Did you have a week to prepare for it? Was the book out a week before the turn? Is that right?
It was 2 weeks out.
Okay.
So I actually was able the weekend that the book came out, I actually got 7 games in with AdMech. Yeah,
That's pretty intense.
yeah, because it was one of those things that we had our tournaments back to back from Mark's thing. It was the Slaughter Day and Sunday.
Yep, Sunday Day.
Yeah, Sunday Day. There we go. So I got 6 games there, and then I got a game on Monday as well. Just because I was like, I need to intake and get as much as I can from this. And I'd been studying this book, all of the reviews of this book for like the previous week anyway. So
awesome.
Yep.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and transition over to Mark. So Mark, another fellow teammate, actually took a trip across the country this last weekend
That's right, back
participate. Home. So where are you from originally, Mark?
Originally from a little town called Endicott, New York, mostly known for IBM, like kind of that was what was there. Close to Binghamton in central New York. We bristle whenever someone says upstate. That's like the Hudson Valley. We're in the part of New York that no one knows exists between Albany and Buffalo.
Sure.
Went down to New Jersey when I went to college at Stevens Tech in Hoboken, and lived in New Jersey for about 20 years before I moved out here to Arizona.
Gotcha.
So it was kind of a going home to meet some of the old guys I used to play with, and none of them were there.
That's rough.
Yep.
So not to get political or whatever, but you're like me. You're a blue state refugee.
So the weird part about where I grew up in New York State is it is a bunch of rednecks and hillbillies. And if you ever saw the movie Analyze This, where the mafia is like on that farm and the federal agents show up and chase them off the farm, and there are Italian mafia guys on tractors. Yeah, that was literally 20 minutes from where I grew up.
That's funny.
So it really is.
It really is. It's a real thing, and it really happened. And that part of New York State is absolutely not blue. New York City is blue. The rest of New York State wishes Manhattan would float off into the ocean.
So that's exactly like where I'm from. I'm from redneck downstate Farmville, Illinois.
Yep.
And yeah,
same deal with Chicago. Yep.
Totally. Anyway, that's enough politics. So take the trip back home out east to participate in Atlantic City Open. Excuse me. And you took what many people think to be like not a particularly powerful faction and did extremely well over the weekend. So if you could just go ahead and give us a quick rundown of what you took, why you took it, and then maybe, how did you do so well, Mark?
Sure. So a couple things. One, the reason I'm playing World Eaters this year, there's a guy, Jamie Miller, who came up with, during the COVID stuff, came up with a YouTube channel called The Red Path. And he issued a challenge, let's see who can be the top World Eaters player for this year. And he's going to, he's running his whole channel about how are things going with people playing World Eaters and trying to get people to to do cool things in the community, but also be playing World Eaters. And you're absolutely right. It is the Chaos Space Marine Codex has issues, and the World Eaters are probably the most gimped legion in the world, in the entire Chaos Space Marine Codex. But with that said, one of the things I ran into is everybody is teching for Drukhari. Everyone's teching for Dark Angels. Everyone is teching for AdMech. No one has any clue what the heck I'm bringing. So, and the other thing that we have, I think, as an advantage is we've been playing 9th edition like fiends here in Phoenix. The league that we have, the Arizona State League that we have that's going, I've played probably, Tim was saying he's played 7 games. I have probably played 30 to 40 games with this army, just over the course of 2 leagues. And a couple of things so the list has a few things that I think work really good right now in the current meta. It's got a lot of toughness 8 in the 3 Vindicators that I bring. It's got a Lord of Skulls, so that's also toughness 8. And backing that toughness 8 up is 5-up invulnerable saves. The demon saves on a lot of things. I bring a Dark Apostle with Illusory Supplication, so that puts 5-up saves on the Vindicators. And if you look at the guns that people are bringing right now to deal with vehicles, it's Melta, it's Dark Lances, it's a small number of shots at a strength 8, high AP, and they think that's going to work. Well, when it stops wounding on 3s and starts wounding on 4s, and then you make a third of those saves that they thought you were going to get no save, all of a sudden they don't have the guns to knock your guns out. So that's one thing. And the other thing, without people seeing Chaos Space Marines, when I throw fragile units into them, like the Warp Talons that I have in the list, those Warp Talons bust something up and then just touch guns. And yeah, you kill them. Turn 1, turn 2, they're dead, but they didn't shoot anything I needed you not to shoot that turn. So some of our experience of having played for a long time is if you can push somebody into their deployment zone on turn 1 and hold them there, then you can win on primaries. And it doesn't matter what your codex is you're playing. If they can't get out of their deployment zone because they're locked in, then people start getting really kind of confused at what's happening in the game that they're playing.
That's, that's intuitive, right? And that's
Yep.
like one of the reasons why I know another faction, Richard Siegler's Tau did well over the weekend,
Yep.
but one of the reasons Tau has not been doing well, right, is because people don't ever leave the deployment zone, right? And you're not going to win the game even if you table the other guy's army.
Absolutely correct. If you put yourself in a corner, then you're doing your job for me. Like every time I see someone deploy, like I played Aaron in one of our tournaments that Tim was talking about, and he put himself in a corner, and I was more than happy to slam the door on him, and he couldn't get out fast enough to make a game of it. So
what do you have in the list that's good at boxing people in? So you have 3 Vindicators, the Lord of Skulls. That's like you're like 1,000 points in already in 4 model, right?
So well, it's funny because the Vindicators are ridiculously cheap. They're 135 points each. So that block is actually the 3 Vindicators in Karn, the Betrayer, who is the stupidest character I've ever seen because he's a fantastic artillery babysitter. He lets you reroll all your failed hits. So
that's
sitting
fluffy. That seems
totally fluffy that
he
should stand in a triangle of Vindicators, just slapping them and telling them to shoot straight. Completely what I would expect of that character. Anyway, that aside, that's my own personal issues and why I don't usually play World Eaters. But that's 500 points. The Lord of Skulls is 500 points. And then the other 1,000 points, the first 500 is things I want to smash you in the face with. So it's 10 Warp Talons. It's I actually use a Greater Possessed as my warlord. He's got Violent Urgency and the Talisman of Burning Blood, so he can move up the board. He can advance and charge. He gets out of a Rhino, runs forward 8 plus a d6 inches, so he gets far enough forward that he can boost the charge on the Warp Talons and also make them Strength 5, which helps a lot. Then there's a unit of Berserkers that is the second wave in after that. And then I just have other units. I have 2 units of Chaos Space Marines that just sit on my objectives and make sure I'm scoring points. The other sneaky thing that's in the list that a lot of people don't account for is there's 2 Rhinos, and for 10 points more, you can put an extra Combi Melta on that Rhino, and now I have a 10 wound Space Marine that moves 12 inches, has toughness 7, driving around the board, going around your unit to park next to your character and shoot it in the face with a melta gun. They're again super fluffy, right? My assassins are rhinos with melta guns. So all of that pushes forward on turn 1. The World Eaters do have a really cool stratagem called Apoplectic Frenzy. So those Warp Talons that start at the edge of my deployment zone go forward 9 inches before the game starts. If I go first, they're 3 inches outside your deployment zone. There is absolutely nowhere you can hide from that charge. And so they will slap into something I think you don't want them to hit, and then you have to kill them on turn 1, and then the Berserkers come in and lock things down, and you have to kill them on turn 2, and by then, hopefully, if things are going well and I've remembered, I've moved the Lord of Skulls into your line, and then you have to deal with that monster. So by the time you've killed all of that stuff, and I'm down to my 500 points of Vindicators and Karn, it's already turn 4, and you're still in your deployment zone.
So is your backfield? I mean, so there's not a lot of objective secured in the backfield, right? So the backfield's tanks and Karn, it sounds like most of the time.
Yep. So the joy of objective secured is if you're dead, it doesn't matter what I have on the objective. And with 3 Vindicators turning around and just shooting whatever you've dropped in my backfield, all I need is the 5 Chaos Space Marines if one of them is standing on the objective.
So maybe this
It'll do it.
Maybe this is just a bias of the armies that I play. But so Harlequin, Tyrannid, and then even Drukhari have a lot of small objective secured units. A lot of them,
they do.
A lot of them move fast, or they're in transports that fly. And so, were you worried, or did you run into situations where people were just so you have a wave of guys coming in, and they just send objective secured units over you to go, take points away from your Vindicators in the backfield?
So one of the things that is both frustrating and I think also why people don't like the Chaos Space Marine Codex is a lot of people are still locked into playing 8th edition and trying to kill the enemy to win. So when I play, I have to be very careful about choosing my targets. Like when I played Eric's Drukhari, and I played Drukhari in the last game at the ACO. Step number 1 is kill anything that can move. If it can move more than 8 inches, it dies on as soon as I have an opportunity to shoot it. So all the Raiders go down. All the Vipers go down next. Whatever I can, if I have to throw Berserkers at them and fight them in close combat, if I have to send my Warp Talons into their Raiders instead of into something that's soft and chewy, it doesn't matter. Those transports have to die, and those Dark Eldar have to walk into my deployment zone, into 3 Vindicators and Lord of Skulls. Good luck with that. So that's not, well, it is a problem if they go first and they're super aggressive. The games I've played, they send some stuff forward, but they always want to have that second wave. And because they haven't seen Chaos Space Marines, especially my armies are always weird. They haven't seen 3 Vindicators that can reroll all their hit rolls. They're like, oh, I'll just come in turn 2. No, you will not, because that stuff is dead. So it makes, and it takes them out of their game. Their game is I move fast. Well, your game is not you move fast if everything's on the ground. So it slows them down and throws them off their game. If it's something like the Harlequins I have a problem with. Space Wolves can also just dump into your face with those Thunderwolf cavalry. If they go first and they advance and charge into me before I can get the brakes on them, it can be a problem.
Interesting.
For sure.
So what armies did you actually face over the weekend?
Yeah, so my first game was against Grey Knights. I thought that was going to be really interesting because I have not seen Grey Knights in forever. He had a really interesting list. He had all the tricks, the shoot through walls and bringing guys in, danger close to shoot the Lord of Skulls with all their weapons that mess up demons. I was fortunate. He went first. I moved my Warp Talons up. He had his guys that can shoot through walls behind a wall to shoot the Lord of Skulls, and I used Scorn of Sorcery to cancel that psychic power. So now they could see absolutely nothing. And then the Warp Talons ate their faces. And that was basically the start of the downgrade from there, because after that unit was gone, he had nothing to deal with the toughness 8. So the Vindicators rolled forward, the Lord of Skulls rolled forward, and just kind of picked whatever the nearest threat was and ate it. And that was the game, I would say, the game plan, probably because I was the most focused on it, went correctly. It was, I hold my secondaries, you went first, but I will shoot you off of your primaries before you can score them. So he was in a big hole the whole game, because he would have to get on primaries and then he get shot off them. And then he could either fight me or he could try to get primary points. So that game went pretty well. Second game was a vital intelligence game against a Tzeentch army, which was kind of a nightmare. It had Magnus, it had the big chicken in it. It had 4 other sorcerers. The 30-man pink horror blob with the summoning points. So if you kill them, they turn into blue horrors. Just a potential nightmare. So I braced up, went right into it, and Magnus doesn't like Vindicators, and neither do other characters that get clumped together, because we still have the line breaker stratagem. So when you stick your guys together, I eat them all with a bomb that says you take 3d3 mortal wounds, you take 3d3 mortal wounds, and the guys that I needed to stick in and stuff that 30-man unit of horrors in his deployment zone held until turn 4. He almost got out. Somehow Magnus made it around the corner, and then died on turn 5 to Vindicators. But by the time he got out of his corner, he was so down on primaries that he couldn't catch up. So it's kind of a war of attrition in that game. The third game was when the wheels fell off everything. I played against Admech, and I failed 22 5-up demon saves in a row. He dropped bombs on my warp talons on turn 1 and scored 7 mortal wounds out of 10 die rolls. And then when I shot back with my 3 Vindicators, I did a grand total of 3 damage. So that game was pretty much done. I don't know how it would have played if it was an actual game, but he had the right strategy. He had the right weapons, because unlike everybody else, Admech comes with anti-tank that's not strength 8. So he had the tools that were necessary to knock down the Lord of Skulls, and then the next turn he ate the Vindicators, and it was over by turn 2. So that game went really badly, but I did have the joy of the tourney organizer coming over and looking at my army and going, wait, what? You're in the top 30 tables here. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're playing World Eaters. Yeah. And just being able to be that calm, cool, collected. So what? You expected me to play Drukhari? But then I got raffle stomped, and it was fun, because then they're like, yeah, see, you flew too close to the sun. And I was like, maybe I did, because like I said, sometimes it is what it is. If things don't go right, the Chaos Space Marines don't have the ability to recover. Other people have numbers or extra stratagems or backup plans. We don't. If you break it, we're done.
There's just not that many wounds in the army.
Correct.
Right.
There's not, and there's no way to put anything back. There's no way to re-roll everything. It's you either get things going to the plan, or if someone breaks the wheels off, you kind of score as many points as you can and hope you can outthink your opponent.
Sure. That's harder to do when you're playing World Eaters, right? Like more of a thematic army.
Yep.
In order to keep the theme, you've limited the tools and options available, right? And so that when the wheels fly off of that, they fly off even harder, right?
Because you can't fall back on smites, you can't prescient something up, you can't. My old favorite, you can't just drop a unit of obliterators and have them fire twice and knock down way more than they should. You don't have any of that stuff. All you have is a fist that you showed your opponent. Here's what I'm going to fight you with. Please stand in the way of it. Yep.
That was game 3.
Yep.
So game 3, your hopes of going undefeated for the weekend get dashed. But there's a lot of tournament left. So what happens next?
Absolutely. So went and got some dinner. As I told them, it means I can relax for the next day. I've already, the guy I was telling you earlier about, one of the guy my friends from the hobby shop I used to play at there that I was almost paired with in the first round, which is hilarious. He just comes by and he's like, "Wait, you're 2-1 with your World Eaters? That's crazy." I'm like, "Yeah, the other World Eaters player that's here is 2-1 also." We were literally like neck and neck, me and the other World Eaters player at the end of day 1 at 2-1. So close that when we started day 3, we were playing at tables next to each other. So day 3, take a deep breath, realize that no matter almost what happens the next day, I'm having fun. I have had no bad opponents, which is unbelievable at a tournament this size. On that next game, I draw Space Wolves. And this is, again, when that habit of having played so many games amongst the club and amongst the other folks here in Arizona, played so many times against Space Wolves that the shenanigans that they have, we already know. So spent a long time explaining to that player how the line breaker stratagem works. And he still deployed everything directly behind a building. And so I went first. I moved the Vindicators forward. I jumped the Warp Talons 3.01 inches away from the back wall of a building and fired the line breaker stratagem into a big mob of guys. And he's like, "Well, you can't see them." I'm like, "Right, but I can see the backside of that building. I can't see past the building, but I can hit the wall of the building." And he's like, "Oh, yeah." Fortunately, I missed a lot. I did kill 3 Blade Guard, which was kind of fun. And then the Warp Talons went in, and I give that guy a huge amount of credit, because this was when my thing that I would take away from day 2 is I was not paying enough attention to secondaries. My whole focus had been on stuff people in their zones, don't let them out, win on primaries. I had taken Assassinate because Space Wolves like to throw their characters at you to fight, and I didn't kill any of his characters, which is almost unbelievable, actually. But he played so cagily that he clawed back. Let me check. I think the final score of that 4th game, I beat him by 10 points. And that 10-point difference was exactly the difference in our primaries. So he took all of I scored 0 points on Assassinate. So he made that game way close, considering how big of a punch-in he took on that first turn and how hard he had to fight to get out. He played super well to recover in that game. So fantastic opponent, great game, snuck out the win, and moved on to the next round against someone I never practice against, Death Guard.
That's sarcasm for everybody.
It's how I hug. Yeah. So looking across the table at Death Guard, I was like, awesome. I know exactly what to do here. I just turn the table sideways. I stay 22.1 inches away from the Death Guard and just shoot the snot out of them. Anything that comes close gets eaten by Warp Talons and Berserkers. I've literally built my list to not care what shenanigans you have that you take -1 damage, because Warp Talons don't care and neither do Berserkers. I'm super good, and then promptly drove my army right down the middle of the board into his mouth. And slugged it out in the middle of the board. And as I was playing, I'm like, what? Something's not right here. And then I started moving my Lord of Skulls away from him. And I'm like, I'm watching myself move the Lord of Skulls to hold objectives instead of moving into his army. And I'm like, why is this hard? So that game got even closer because I was playing like an idiot. I ended up winning that game 69-64, so 5 points. Another player that did a really, really good job of not stopping, which a lot of times when people play my armies, they get punched so hard on the first couple turns that they mentally check out.
Sure.
And totally he did not. He just kept coming. He made some really good plays. In classic style, I had 5 guys on an objective. He would have won the game. He hit 4 times on my 5 guys on the objective. I failed every single save. Made the morale check. Otherwise, he would have pulled out a win. Just a really good game where I totally stopped paying attention to what I was doing and just went full on. The nails took me, drove right into the middle. We were brawling and lots of stuff was dying. For whatever reason, I did not take Bring It Down, despite the fact he had like 10 points worth of vehicles that I knew I had to kill and could have scored easy points. just not paying attention to secondaries, but still managed to eke out the win solely because of all of the practice that we've had against Death Guard and the fact that I know what they are and aren't capable of doing and could push his army, even when I was making mistakes, to fight where I wanted the fight to be instead of where he wanted the fight to be. And then into the last game, and, finally had to happen. Climbed up high enough. There was no way I wasn't playing Drukhari at some point during the tournament. Got Drukhari in the last game. And I want to thank Eric because he came to IO to play a practice game so I could find out how the new Drukhari work. His list was very similar to the list that I played. And as a result, the Dark Eldar player went first. He had hit all of his stuff, came out from behind where he was hiding to shoot. And like I said, they have Dark Lances. Dark Lances are fantastic for killing things that aren't toughness 8 and don't have a 5-up invulnerable save. So he did almost no damage, and my return fire knocked 5 of his 6 raiders out of the sky.
Oh,
Wow.
We don't play games with them. Demon Forge on a Lord of Skulls turns raiders into paper. Vindicators, D6 shots at strength 10, D6 damage, re-rolling all their failed hit rolls, knocks down raiders like nothing. So dumped almost all of his stuff out. His last raider hid behind a building until I think turn 4 or turn 5. Nothing in his army crossed the midpoint of the board until turn 5. So that's not true. A few things got across the board, but they were mostly getting across the board to try to stop my Vindicators from shooting. So there were like three witches would run into a Vindicator to try to stop it from shooting for a turn. But another fantastic opponent. That game was even closer at the end, despite all the shenanigans, despite him scoring a grand total of 15 points on primaries up until round 5. He lost that game by 2 points.
Whoa.
2 points. I beat him 72-70. Again, I thoroughly failed to pay attention to secondaries. I picked Vital Grounds. It was battle lines. So I picked Vital Grounds and thought once I knocked his guys out of the raiders, they wouldn't come up. Well, they totally did. So trying to, like you were saying, this is the one game where me not having a lot of OBSEC hurt me because I had a Lord of Skulls sitting on one of those middle objectives. Well, that's not OBSEC. So
Correct.
he would come in, prevent me from scoring those points, prevent me from holding the objective. The Lord of Skulls would sweep everything off of the objective. So he didn't score it either. But then
that one really brave Cabalite runs up and says, "This is my objective."
Exactly. Yep.
The 60-foot tall death.
Yeah, exactly. It's my objective. And then he's like, no.
So this goes back to my question that I had earlier. Okay, so the Drukhari player,
yep.
If they had a better feel for what their math was capable of, because I'm guessing with 6 raiders, they had 6 Dark Lance shots,
yep.
Maybe a couple of others. They're going to hit with 4 or 5 of them, maybe if some of them are in rerolls. They're going to wound. They're going to wound with
half of those.
Yeah. So we'll even round up 3.
Yep.
And you're going to block at least one of them.
Yep.
So they're going to do on average 9 points of damage.
Yep.
Right at distance, and then they've exposed all their transport. So if they had a better feel for the math there, and he had just stayed hidden and had those raiders available to do the objective grabs throughout the game, what do you think happens in that map?
Then I think he loses by even more because if he would have stayed back, then I'm scoring that secondary because he has to send something forward onto those objectives. I
don't mean staying back forever. I just mean he has top of turn 1.
Oh yeah.
How much could you have maneuvered to hit him if he had just stayed hidden on turn 1?
So
and started
he had
moving
so
out
many.
On 2.
He had. I'm trying to think if he had 5 or 6 raiders. He had 5 or 6 raiders and 2. What the heck are the bigger ones with the 3 guns?
Ravager.
Yes. 2 of the Ravagers. So he had 7 vehicles. He couldn't hide all of them. So his option was send some forward, or because he had deployed behind cover, I think hoping that I would go first. But there was the Lord of Skulls was on one flank, so it could move and see 2 or 3. The Vindicators moved up and touched the buildings in the middle. They could see 1 or 2. So I think if he had gone if he had not gone first, I think that play would have worked. But he would have been basically sacrificing his entire first turn, and instead of scoring some wounds, scoring none to not shoot, because the only target he really had with all of those guns was the Lord of Skulls at that point, because you can't hide it. But he's not going to hurt that thing. So then what he would have had to deal with from my list going forward would have been the 10 Warp Talons. And from my experience with the game I played against Eric, if you let me shoot first, damage that the army does to whatever targets you have exposed, because you can't hide everything, is pretty harsh.
So this is a segue into kind of just a generic question about the tournament. So I've heard rumblings. I wasn't there. I didn't see any of the tables. What was your feel for the amount of terrain and the ability to hide stuff? Is this just a product of kind of a little bit light of a tournament table, or like on any tournament table, your shooting would have just been so brutal you couldn't come back?
Well, I think there were many times when I could not shoot at targets on the edges of the board because the Vindicators end up in the middle a lot. I think there was plenty of terrain. I think a lot of people were playing, like you were saying earlier, very passively. They were sitting back. And if you sat back, there were 3 pieces of terrain almost always in your deployment zone, but you have such a big army, you can't hide all of it. So I don't know what terrain folks are usually playing on. This was definitely more terrain than we usually play on. In our regular games, they had at least 10 pieces of terrain. I will say almost every board had, well, if I go with the ones that were probably the most complained about, they had, it was the ruined urban setting they have with the big 3-story building that at one point was one building.
Yes, that one's super awkward.
They broke it in half and took it apart, so it was now 2 buildings. So you know they kind of offset it a little bit, so you couldn't see through both buildings. If you're playing short way across the table, you could touch both buildings and you still have the same thing going on, where you could see the whole board. I think if there was one thing that would probably make some of these folks happier, it would be if those buildings in the middle of the table didn't have windows. So like a Lord of Skulls could hide behind it, or a Greater Demon, or whatever they're having a problem with hiding, Magnus, whoever, because everything was buildings and ruins and windows, and it was all obscuring, but all of these things that are not protected from obscuring terrain were pretty visible all the time. Other units, there was plenty of terrain to hide behind, in my opinion.
Gotcha. So the other thing I'll say though is you had a successful weekend. So you're typically on the higher tables.
Yep.
Would you say it was the same story if instead of 5-1 you had been 1-5? Do you think you'd have the same opinion on the terrain?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of terrain on the tables. I could send you some pictures of some of the tables that were set up, because I got there Wednesday. I helped them set the tables up on Thursday. I was impressed by the amount of terrain that was on there, and I think, like, at times I had trouble moving my Lord of Skulls because there wasn't enough room to drive between the buildings. So I don't know what kind of tables. Maybe it's because they constantly play on Tabletop Simulator. On Tabletop Simulator, the middle terrain pieces are solid obscuring terrain pieces. There are no windows. So even if you touch the terrain, you can't see through it.
Yeah.
So if that's what people want from terrain at a big tournament, then I think that would be, I could understand then, having seen what I saw at the tournament, that there were not any of those pieces of terrain where it was an obscuring piece of terrain with no way to see through it at all.
Yeah, so that might be an issue. The other thing that I've heard, just the number of solid buildings that Frontline Gaming still has in their collection.
Yep.
How do you play those in 9th edition? Because they're kind of strange and awkward in the rules. And now that you've had several games on the terrain,
yep.
How do those work, and what are people's opinions of those?
So when you say solid, you mean like they're actually ruins instead of just the walls, and if you're touching the wall, you're in the building?
Well, what would have been like a magic box in 8th?
Oh yeah,
Right?
no, there
So-
were no magic boxes. There were no if we, with ninth edition, if you're in the building, people can shoot you as long as there's line of sight, and there were no closed buildings on the tables. So there were absolutely no magic boxes.
So I mean, were there no magic boxes? I'm trying to think. So like the field based set of terrain from ITC has a
Yep.
number of square, like enclosed buildings. Maybe my memory's bad. I thought
So-
those were solid on all 4 walls.
Yeah, and there were none of those there. What they had at this tournament was the Orc Village, and the Ruined City. So everything had well, I won't say everything, but the vast majority of the terrain pieces, I could walk my Hellbrute through the buildings. So I don't think that there was. I'm trying to think if there were any problematic pieces of terrain, and there may have been, but it's the same terrain sets. They just painted them differently. So I don't think so. I'd have to think about the Tau build. I have to look at the Tau tables to see. The Tau tables might have had some problem with that, but I think they all had windows in them.
Cool. Excellent. Well, so I got so overall 5-1. What was your final placing in the tournament?
25th. I was literally one place away from top chaos player at the tournament. The guy that got top.
And do you know how many battle points you were away from top 8?
Oh no!
I mean, I know you're many places, but
that game three, I got housed.
Okay.
So game 3, I even in a loss, I'll usually score 50 or 60 points because primaries and grabbing secondaries. That game I scored I think 23 points, and 10 of those points were painting. So
Wow.
that game went about as wrong as I've had a game go in a while. So
Sure. Okay. So a couple more questions. So for people who might be on the East Coast and are thinking about going to Atlantic City Open next, okay, if you can drive to the tournament, should people go to Atlantic City next?
I would say absolutely. It was a lot of fun. The convention, the convention hall is ginormous. So one of the things that can happen at a big tournament is the tables get smacked on top of each other, and you can't. I remember distinctly crawling under tables to get to the other side. There was plenty of room around all of the tables, and room for more tables, even on top of the fact that you had the 40K tournament going, the Age of Sigmar tournament going, the Star Wars tournament going, all in the same room. It was just a ginormous room. So that was awesome. I think the organization was pretty well done, all things considered. 256 person tournament. You have guys that just don't show up and don't tell you they're dropping. So there were a couple times when especially on the lower tables, that they had to repair stuff. I don't know how most tables, whether or not they were happy with how everything was judged or whatever. I also, like I said, I had great luck to have 6 opponents that I didn't have any problems with, which is in and of itself a miracle. I think the biggest downsides I saw to the venue, which I don't know if they're correctable, are the fact it's in a casino. So everything is expensive, including the parking. But if you're not staying in the hotel, you're paying $5 a day for parking. Whoop-de-doo. You pay $10. Wow. All other than that, it was 6 really good games that ran on time. So I have no complaints.
So I think I can predict your answer to the next question. If you're somebody like us who driving is not possible, and you're going to have to invest in a plane ticket to fly to the event, is this something that's worth the time, effort, money to fly to?
So this year I would have said yes. Now they have the Lone Star Open. They're going to do one I think they're going to do one in California. You got the Vegas Open. You got the GW events. I don't know if I would do it again, because it has nothing to do with the fact it took me 24 hours to get home because Southwest blew up their whatever weather system thing. It has nothing to do with that. It's a hassle to hike your army across the country. if you have to fly. And if I had known that there were going to be so many options for super majors in our area, even the one in the Lone Star Open is close enough that you could theoretically drive if you wanted to. I don't know if I would hike from here all the way over there. There's plenty close enough. If you want to play some people you have not played and see a completely different meta, then sure. If you have especially if you have a very, very transportable army. But yeah, I don't.
Completely fair answer. What are you changing in your army, if anything, going forward after this weekend?
Well, I would say, but Tim's on, so he's gonna no.
Please, I'll kill your world eaters anyway with my strength 9 D3 +3 damage last game. It was all over the place.
Yeah, so I did take some lessons away from the games, even as well as they went. The fact that people had those pesky few wounds of units left that would like in the game against the Drukhari, one incubi was still alive and wouldn't die, so it walked up and touched 2 Vindicators, and they couldn't shoot. So I'm sitting there thinking, how do I stop that? Oh, hey, Havoc launchers cost 5 points, and it's a whole lot of shots that say, oh, is there somebody left? No, there's not. They're gone. I put Combi Meltas on the Vindicators because if you want to walk up and touch my Vindicator with your character, good luck. It's re-rolling its Combi Melta shot into your face, and you're probably going to die. So the Vindicators are getting more killy. I get 2 CP back we'll finally be playing 2021. My Lord of Skulls that used to cost me 3 CP now only cost me 1. So that's a happy day. I am actually with the change to Dread Claws that says you can drop a Dread Claw in on turn 1 now and get out of it as well and launch that attack. Getting rid of one of my Rhinos and getting even more aggressive with the list of what pushes in your face on turn 1. So, and it also provides me more options for like the Line Breaker secondary because I could theoretically have 7 units in your deployment zone on turn 1. So, trying to get more into basically breaking the meta of most people like to sit back and shoot. I want to be in your face with enough units that even though you have the command points to Overwatch, even though you have the command points to interrupt, even though you have some cool psychic abilities that say you fight last or the Armor of Rust or everybody has something. I have so many units that are attacking you that it overwhelms you with threats that you have to deal with before you can start shooting at me. So trying to get even more aggressive, which is impressive if you've ever played the list.
All right, so final question.
Yep.
You did very well at an extremely large tournament with, again, what people would consider to be kind of an underpowered, unconventional army. Do you think that your performance would have been possible in 8th edition? And what does that say about 9th edition that you could do what you did over the weekend?
So I would say probably not in 8th edition because 8th edition was very much, well, at least in my experience, was very much if you can't survive until the end of the game, your opponent can just outscore you on mission points. 9th edition is about holding objectives. So I don't know if it's not just something that the world leaders can do. It's something anybody can do. The world leaders just happen to have some unique tools that help them do it. Being able to shove someone into their deployment zone and just rack points up on primaries and keep them off of them would not have happened in 8th edition. So in 9th edition, it is possible. I don't need multiple wound. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, you don't have 2 wound Space Marines. You don't have, I'm like, no. So yeah, I get hurt more by Overwatch. Yes, I get hurt more by psychic powers, but I also don't care that your weapon does 8 million damage. I have 1 wound. Either I save or I die. It's a nice on-off switch. So yeah, no, I don't think they could have done it in 8th edition. I do think that other armies can do the same thing in 9th edition, and probably some of the new codexes can do it even better than the Marine Codex can. But I also think that a lot of people are stuck in 8th edition mindset in the way they play, and that's why they think some of these older codexes are not good.
Excellent answer. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to say, Mark?
Blood for the Blood God.
So, Mark, have you picked up the Marnius Calgar comic books?
I'm paid to lead, not to read.
Oh,
no, I have not. But I did see the one where he's ripping off the Lord of Skull's head.
Yeah. There's it's the bad guys are corn. I might get a.
I will have to look into it because it is why I play the World Eaters. A corn brand of guys is because they are the bad guys, and someone has to be the bad guys. And while there are no good guys, there are definite bad guys.
Tim, you've been quiet for a little while. Any final thoughts or comments before we head out for the evening?
Not really. No.
Okay.
I really don't have anything to say at this point. I said my piece.
Beep beep beep.
Yeah,
All right.
beep beep beep. Exactly. 0101000111. Come on, I don't fucking know.
Well, Mark and Tim, I'd like to thank you guys both for hanging out with us for the last hour, letting us pick your brains over your tournament experience last weekend. For everybody watching, I do want to say I know we've had some network issues with the video. I hope the audio has been working and everybody's been able to hear us. We'll figure out the video issues for next time, and we'll keep improving. I appreciate you all very much for hanging out with us, and if you like what we do, you can always subscribe, hit the alert button, so you won't miss this when we do it next time. I know the team has quite a few tournaments that they're going to head to through the end of the season. I know myself, I have like 4 GTs that I'm going to, which is crazy. We have a lot of very active people, so we'll be doing many of these videos in the future. So with that, I think that's all that we have. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. Have a great night. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. Take care. Bye.
Adios.